There's a lot of talk about virtualization, and I'd really like to talk about some of the challenges that exist in virtualization, and a little bit of the myths that go on behind the scenes, and just to bring some exposure to how do we turn virtualization from being just a tactic or something that we apply over a small area of our data center or IT operation to more of a strategy of how does this fit in with how I'm going to deliver more services, get more out of my data centers, and ultimately deliver value to the business. So without further ado, here's some of these myths. I think the number one thing I see is that people generally believe that when they virtualize, the power consumption is automatically going to go down because we're consolidating equipment. And that's definitely not true. In about half of the cases I see, the power consumption actually increases. And the reason it increases is for a whole bunch of different reasons. One of which is we go and we replace our white box standard commodity servers with large blade systems that aren't doing very much but consuming quite a bit of power. And we'll see that all of a sudden the power consumption is more than the environment that we virtualized. Similarly, anytime you free up a little bit of space in the data center, some guy down the hall now realizes there's space and power for his equipment and his services, goes and puts those in, and you look at the power bill at the end of the month and you notice that the power bill is higher. So the thing about virtualization is just because you're virtualizing doesn't mean the power goes down. In fact, it means it could go up. You could be using more power-hungry systems, and you really need to look at exactly what are you replacing and what is the new systems that you're going to be putting that on. Similar to that is most people believe that the savings in virtualization are actually from the process of consolidating applications onto virtual servers. The reality is that 80% of the savings from virtualization come from decommissioning equipment that's no longer in use. So it's applications that people have forgot about, the application owners or business owners have moved on or are no longer with the company, and by discovering these during the consolidation process, we actually get most of the savings in virtualization. The remaining 20% is actually from the service consolidation using the virtualization platform. Even more similar to that is when you have an application that's running in a dedicated environment, and let's say that application is unused, it's still not really being used efficiently, and so what happens is you have an application that's doing absolutely nothing, you then virtualize it, it's still doing absolutely nothing, and as a result, just because you virtualize doesn't mean your utilization of your data center actually increases. What you actually see is the utilization of the system, the virtual system, may be greater than the utilization of each of the individual dedicated systems, but the reality is that's just the overhead of processing each of the virtual machines. And so what happens is you're still maintaining those applications which aren't being utilized. Those applications then are still costing you in terms of overhead, software licensing, maintenance, etc., and then making sure that they're up and running and meeting SLAs. So you really need to get to the bottom of which equipment is actually being used, which servers are really being used, and just because you're virtualizing doesn't mean you're getting greater utilization or greater work or value out of your data center. There's a number of companies that will claim to have adopted virtualization widespread and will even say that they're fully virtualized. Our entire data center is virtualized. CDW did a study a few months back, and they actually went and audited these data centers that said they were fully virtualized and found that on average they were actually only 37% virtualized. So we're hearing stories of wild success in virtualization, but I think the reality is we're still around the 18, 15, 20% range in virtualization, and the challenge there is around building an environment where not just the test and dev systems can be virtualized, but also the production systems, which kind of gets me to my last point. Right now there's a separation between application owners and the infrastructure that runs the IT environment. And so if I'm an application owner and you say, hey, we're going to virtualize your environment, I'm going to say, no, hold on, I've tested that, it works perfectly fine, and it's running on a dedicated environment right now. I don't see the power bill, I don't see the bill to operate and run that dedicated infrastructure, so as an application owner, I don't want to virtualize it. And there's a lot of pushback. And so there needs to be an understanding of how much is that really costing? What are you paying for that level of service? that you could actually be reducing, and how are these decisions really affecting the efficiency of the company and the service it delivers? So at the end of the day, you really need to be able to quantify what it costs to run the application, which is the power, the overhead, the operations, the licensing, and then what value are you getting out of it? What's the workload? How utilized is it? How many transactions are it? Those kinds of things. So we need to start correlating workload with energy and cost, and by correlating those and putting together metrics like old school mainframe metrics like MIPS per watt, or even transactions per watt, watts per terabyte, we can better understand how to create a strategy whereby we virtualize effectively, we encourage the rest of the organization to virtualize where it's applicable, and at the end of the day have a very efficiently running data center without underutilized applications and services.